and welcome to Within the Frame. I'm Da-eun in Seoul. South Korea and the United States kicked off a large-scale combined Freedom Shield military exercise this week to boost their allied defense against rising North Korea threats. This as South Korea also stepped up its independent monitoring of North Korean activities through its first military spy satellite. Efforts toward dialogue also continued, with a top U.S. official hinting that Washington could consider laying out interim steps on the path to the North's denuclearization. For an in-depth analysis on these stories and their implications, we have Go Myong-hyun, Senior Research Fellow at the Institute for National Security Strategy, joining us in the studio. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Also joining us tonight is Evans Revere, former U.S. Acting Assistant Secretary of State for East Asia and Pacific Affairs. Thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be with you.
All right, I want to start with you, Dr. Go. Freedom Shield combined drill, it comes at a pivotal time when inter-Korean tensions have hit new highs. What's expected from this year's exercise?
Well, this is an annual exercise that the United States and the South Korea conduct together. But what's different this time is the timing. This is the first Freedom Shield exercise that's taking place after North Korea canceled the inter-Korean military agreement that was signed back in 2018. So that's the source of potential friction. There are some concerns that North Koreans could lash out at this. North Korea has always been opposed to the joint military drills between South Korea and the United States, and made as a prime condition in part of their denuclearization negotiations. So since this is taking place in the aftermath of the cancellation of the military agreement, this could be, I guess North Korea could take advantage of this opportunity to launch provocations. But at the same time, there'll be the military of the United States and South Korea will be ready for that. More technically, this exercise is a larger scale than before. It has more participants through the United Nations command mechanism. There are participation of observers from the United Nations, the countries that belong to the United Nations command, such as Australia, and then Canada, and so forth. And in addition to that, technically, this exercise combines the command post exercise with field exercises. This is a very important. The FDX, or field training exercise, has been a sticking point as well for North Korea, because North Korea sees the physical movement of military units taking place in and around the Korean Peninsula, often made that into an argument or like an excuse to mount tensions. But this time around, the size of the field training exercise has grown larger. But at the same time, it's going to really help the militaries of both countries to be more prepared and for any kind of contingency. So it's really necessary, but at the same time, it's much larger. So I think that could be a source of provocation for North Korea.
So this year's exercise, it sounds like it's been boosted in various aspects, especially as you've mentioned, it's taking place after the two Koreas have scrapped the 2018 military tension reduction agreement. And it also comes at a time when Kim Jong-un has drawn a much more vivid line between the two Koreas, while also making major policy shifts in unification, right? And according to some reports citing military sources, this year's drill will include cognitive warfare scenarios for the very first time. What does cognitive warfare refer to, and why is it gaining more importance?
Well, it's a new iteration of the already existing concept of psychological warfare or psychological operations. In shorthand, it's called PSYOP. So this is a way to manipulate information that reaches the minds of the adversaries. It's actually practiced by both sides, both by the United States, South Korea, also North Korea, and other countries such as China and Russia. Russia is a big proponent of this form of warfare. They call it a hybrid warfare, or like information warfare as well. And this is, anyway, using different mechanisms that conveys information, such as sensors, communication networks, cyberspace, to affect the information that reaches the adversary, which in turn affects the perception of what's going on on the battleground, for instance. So by manipulating such information, it could dissuade the adversaries from essentially taking up weapons, or really reduce their willingness to continue with combat. So it's been a long time that military tacticians and strategists thought about this form of warfare. But what has changed in recent years is the fact that first, geopolitically, China and Russia have been very much focused on expanding this form of warfare against the United States and other Western countries. And another reason is the technological advances. So there are way more mediums that can be used and that are used in the battleground to collect information, as well as analyze information, and also allow the commanders to get informed. So the amount of information that are produced and consumed on modern-day battlefield is humongous, to put it simply. So that's the reason why the idea of information warfare is gaining even more ground. And it's interesting that the United States and South Korea have called this form of warfare cognitive warfare, as opposed to psychological operation or like information warfare, or even like influence operations. But these are pretty much the same things. But I guess this really puts the weight on the fact that the modern-day battleground is our information. And I think it's a very much a welcome step forward, in my view.
Some experts also say that the North Korea's drone incursion into the South about a year ago could also be seen as a cognitive warfare because it provoked considerable amount of anxiety and division within South Korea. And Dr. Revere, North Korea was quick to react. It warned of consequences, calling the drill a rehearsal for war that amplifies the unpredictability of the situation in a region that's technically at war. But unlike last year, the North is yet to carry out missile provocations in protest. What do you make of this?
Well, so far, the North Korean reaction overall is pretty much in keeping with past North Korean practice. We've heard some very strong emotional rhetoric from the North Koreans. We've heard them make some accusations. We've heard some threatening rhetoric from them. But so far, no concrete steps have been taken by the DPRK. And curiously, about a day or so ago, there was also a statement out of Pyongyang indicating that North Korea's military, the KPA, their troops were too busy, I think that was the word that was used, engaged in economic construction to respond at this point to what the United States and the ROK were doing. There may actually be a grain of truth to that assertion, since North Korea has indeed deployed significant numbers of its military forces for various economic and agricultural work around the country. But as we know from what we've seen over the years, North Korea always feels compelled to respond when it feels threatened militarily. So we should expect some sort of physical action by the North Koreans at some point, perhaps to include missile launches, cruise missile launches, and we'll see. But I doubt North Korea is going to go beyond that kind of action, especially since precisely because of this military exercise, because of Freedom Shield, U.S. ROK forces are at a very, very high state of preparedness and readiness.
So many barks and no bite yet. So no concrete steps have been taken by North Korea yet, but you do anticipate some physical. North Korea could engage in some physical provocation too, but not to a level beyond traditional levels. That's
my sense. There's going to have to be some movement, some action by the North to basically remind us that they're not to be trifled with, they're not to be toyed with. They need to demonstrate that they have capabilities too. But I think there are limits to what they'll do.
South Korea's first military spy satellite has reportedly transmitted good resolution images of central Pyongyang, where leader Kim Jong-un's office is located. According to the Yonhap news agency, citing military sources, vessels anchored at a port were also clearly seen in the photos. And the South Korean military, what significance does this hold?
Well, I would begin by saying that if South Korean technology is as sophisticated as I believe it is, and I know it is, there have been high-resolution images of a lot more than what you've just described, but I won't go into the details of that. I think the successful launch of South Korea's first reconnaissance satellite is a very important practical step that not only enhances the security of the Republic of Korea, but it enhances the understanding that we have of North Korea's capabilities and its movements and its actions. And if you combine this new asset that's now been deployed with other ROK intelligence collection assets and activities, and with the many US assets deployed on the Korean Peninsula and near the Korean Peninsula, all of these things track North Korea's military activities. And I think they give the US ROK alliance a very robust set of tools that can be used to defend the Republic of Korea. And that's a very positive and very important development.
So it will enhance South Korea's understanding of North Korean activities to a much more higher degree, and it'll also give the ROK-US alliance a robust step of tools to boost their allied defense posture against North Korea. Now, Dr. Goh, meanwhile, opinions remain divided about North Korean satellites' capability. Mallikyung-1 launched last November. South Korean military believes it's not functioning properly, but a satellite expert in the Netherlands has recently said that it's quote-unquote alive after detecting changes in its orbit. I want to get your thoughts on this.
So I mean, in fact, when North Korea launched finally the third try, the Mallikyung-1 spy satellite, and then it was reported that the Mallikyung-1 didn't carry an equipment sophisticated enough to have many useful military purposes. I thought that, I mean, I speculated actually here that there could be another purpose behind the North Korean's effort in launching a spy satellite, when they don't clearly have in their possession sophisticated surveillance technology. It could be the fact that they are testing their re-entry vehicle technology with the Mallikyung-1. And the fact that Mallikyung-1 has showcased its ability to change orbit in space, I think it's exactly an indication that they're testing such technology right now through Mallikyung-1. So, in a way, what's been reported after South Korean military collected debris from earlier attempts at launching the space satellite by North Korea, and then found out that North Korea didn't have at their disposal sophisticated surveillance equipment. So it didn't really matter to North Koreans. After all, what North Koreans had in mind was to test their other aspects of their space technology, not just the space satellite technology. And with the fact that Russia and North Korea are getting closer, it's possible that North Koreans also could make rapid advances in this front in the coming months, in fact.
And the two Koreas plan to launch more spy satellites this year, as well as in the coming years. The South Korean military plans to launch another one in April, while some reports say North Korea's next launch could come sooner than that, perhaps within this month. Do you expect North Korea to outspeed South Korea this time around as well?
Well, it's not really about the speed that matters here. I think it's about systematic use of spy satellites, the quality of data these spy satellites collect from space, and how fast they relay that data. So it's about how good the information these spy satellites can collect from space. And in that regard, I think South Korea has an upper hand, a clear upper hand. In fact, we can really compare the technical specification between the North Korean military satellite and the South Korean military satellite that was launched December last year. For instance, with Mallikyung-1, the maximum resolution of the camera that's actually included in the space satellite, it's a 10 meters resolution. So in fact, it's pretty useless when it comes to using it for military purposes, whereas the image resolution of the South Korean military satellite is 30 centimeters. So we are talking about a difference of 33 times. So it's a night and day difference. And North Koreans are going to keep launching these satellites. It's been reported that North Korea could launch 3 more satellites this year. They will clearly make important strides in achieving usefulness with their satellites. But you wouldn't compare with the systems that South Korea will have in space. South Korea will launch, in addition to the electro-optical satellite that launched last year, it's going to launch 4 more satellites into space. These are going to carry no cameras, but radars, which will allow South Korean military to see, regardless of what kind of weather, all day or night, on the ground. So I think South Korea will have a full spectrum surveillance capability sometime this year, whereas North Korea will remain to be seen whether we'll ever be able to achieve that level of sophistication.
So from technological point of view, North Korea's spy satellites will be no match to South Korea's, but North Korea too will mature its satellite technology through perhaps domestic refinement and perhaps with a little bit of help from Russia, as you mentioned.
That's likely because I think Russians are probably not that eager to supply, for instance, weapon systems that are very visible. But technologies, you can really slip through technology without really creating a controversy too much. So it's likely that that's on the table by Russians.
Now, back to you, Dr. Revere. Meanwhile, the U.S. has shown a fresh sign of efforts to resume dialogue with the North. A White House official has said Washington will consider laying out interim steps on the path to North Korea's denuclearization. The remarks, which came during a forum, marks the first time a top U.S. official has floated the idea of interim steps. How do you interpret this? Could this perhaps be Washington saying a nuclear freeze in return for sanctions relief?
I think this is a pretty important development. I would add to your introduction that the remarks by the National Security Council's Asia director were echoed by Deputy Assistant Secretary of State and North Korea envoy Jung Pak yesterday. She pretty much tracked with what the NSC director said. It's long been U.S. policy that achieving the denuclearization of North Korea was going to be a complicated, a difficult step-by-step process. But I think these new comments that we've just heard go beyond making that point. I think they are a signal of a upcoming major new development in the U.S. policy approach when it comes to dealing with North Korea's nuclear program. These latest remarks, I think, signal a new U.S. willingness to frankly acknowledge that the goal of denuclearization is going to be more than just difficult to achieve. It may be impossible to achieve, and therefore U.S. policy needs to shift to more modest and achievable goals, such as a so-called threat reduction effort or arms control talks. Many of us who've been following U.S.-North Korea policy closely have been concerned for some time that this was where U.S. policy might be heading. We were concerned because this approach amounts to de facto acceptance, however reluctant the acceptance may be, of North Korea as a nuclear state. And to be frank, it also, I think, signals that arms control talks with North Korea, talks with North Korea on either arms control or threat reduction would necessarily involve the United States making some fairly significant concessions to North Korea, including concessions that the United States had previously only been prepared to make for actual denuclearization by North Korea. And knowing what I know about North Korea, these concessions would be made in return for unverifiable, deceptive, and probably false promises by North Korea to limit its nuclear and ballistic missile programs. So in summary, I think U.S. policy is about to take a turn in a very problematic and perhaps even troubling direction. That's my take on this.
You've highlighted some very important points there, Dr. Revere. This could signal Washington's major new step toward resolving the nuclear impasse. And this could also be Washington's way of acknowledging the fact that it's almost impossible to resolve that nuclear impasse. And so Washington is perhaps trying to shift its ways towards a more modest ways. And you've also highlighted that this is quite concerning because it could, in a way, mean that Washington is very reluctantly accepting North Korea as a nuclear state.
Yeah, I think that's perhaps where this is headed. I would only add, if you've got a second, that about 11 or 12 years ago in a conversation with the North Korean foreign minister, a number of us talked about North Korea's goals with respect to denuclearization, and he made it very clear back then that denuclearization was going to be impossible until the United States removed the threat. And when he defined the threat, he mentioned the alliance and the U.S. military presence and our capacity to endanger North Korea. And he said, until then, he said, perhaps we will have to deal with each other as one nuclear state with another. And the best we can do, he said, I'm paraphrasing now, is to engage in arms control talks.
And staying with you, Dr. Revere, Poland and the Czech Republic are in talks with North Korea to resume their diplomatic mission in Pyongyang, according to Voice of America. This comes after a few other European countries, including Germany and Britain, have taken similar steps. What are you reading into this?
Well, with the passing of the pandemic, North Korea has very gradually, slowly been opening up. Trade has been resumed. Other diplomatic missions have reopened. Ambassadors are coming back. Staff members are coming back. And so I think what Western European countries are doing is acknowledging the fact that the door is cracked open again. And so perhaps it's time to see what can be done to put people on the ground and eyes and ears inside North Korea. And since there is so much that we've talked about today that is of concern to the West, to the ROK, to the United States, it's probably a good thing to have as many eyes and ears listening to and observing what's going on in North Korea as possible. So I think this is overall a positive development.
All right, due to time limit, I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there. But thank you so much, both of you, for sharing your perspectives.
A pleasure.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of this show. Thank you for watching, and be sure to tune in same time tomorrow to join our conversation. Goodbye for now.